everyone, thank you for watching. My name is Medea and welcome to my YouTube channel. And you, my friend, you have the best seats in the house for an up-close and personal experience. In this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about the Canadian Citizenship Test, but I have to warn you that I do not have all the information that is inside the study guide. This video is for those who would love to listen to something while working or they want to get ready for their citizenship test. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce some words, even though I tried to look every single detail up online. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. Canada, located in the Northern Hemisphere and in North America, has welcomed generations of newcomers to Canadian shores to help build a free, law-abiding, and prosperous society. For over 400 years, people who arrived in Canada have contributed to the diversity and prosperity of this country, which is rich in history and has strong identity. Canada is a constitutional monarchy, a parliamentary democracy, and a federal state. Canadians are bound together by a shared commitment to the rules and laws and the institution of parliamentary government. Canadians take pride in their identity and have guarded their way of life for centuries. By coming to Canada and taking the citizenship test, you're contributing to history of Canada by creating your own story. Immigrants between the ages of 18 and 54 must have enough knowledge of English or French in order to become citizens. You need to also learn about voting procedures, rights and responsibilities of citizens, and Canadian geography. Canadian citizens have many rights, but Canadians also have responsibilities that they must obey based on Canada's laws and regulations. You have rights and freedoms, and you have to respect those. Applying for citizenship can be hard. When you apply for citizenship, authorities will check your status in Canada and verify your background to make sure you can apply and ensure that you meet the requirements. Your application will take several months, so you always have to have your address updated in the government documentations, so you will receive notifications faster and easier. What does the citizenship test look like? The citizenship test is usually a written one, but it could be an interview. You will be tested on the requirements for citizenship. For example, adequate knowledge of either English language or French language, and number 2, knowledge of Canada, the rights and responsibilities of citizenship, and also the geography. All the citizenship test questions are based on information that is provided in a study guide that is in the form of a book that is given to you by the government. You will be asked about facts that are presented in that guide. You will have to successfully answer the questions on the following topics. Number 1, the rights and responsibilities of a Canadian citizen. For example, how to vote, the right to run for elected office, and voting procedures. Number 2, Canada's government and social, political, cultural history. And last but not least, Canada's geography. After the test, if you pass the test and meet all the other requirements, you will receive a notice to appear to take the oath of citizenship. This document will tell you the date, time, and place of your citizenship ceremony. At the ceremony, you will take the oath of citizenship. You will sign a form, and finally, you will receive your Canadian citizenship certificate. And if you do not pass the test, you will receive a notification indicating the next steps. It is always a good idea to bring your family and friends to celebrate this occasion. What are the rights and responsibilities of citizenship? Like I mentioned before, Canadian citizens have rights and responsibilities. Canadian citizens, they will add to our history, and that is secured by Canadian laws, and they reflect their own history and values. Canadian law has several sources, including laws passed by government and the provincial legislations. English common law, the Civil Code of France, and the unwritten constitution that Canada has inherited from Great Britain. All this dates back to the signing of, and if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Magna Carta, that is also known as the Great Charter of Freedoms, that includes freedom of consciousness, religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, expression, including freedom of speech, and freedom of peaceful assembly, and last but not least, freedom of association. The next right is to challenge unlawful deteriority the states can do. This is the right to challenge unlawful detention by the states, which roots in English common law. The Constitution of Canada was amended in 1982 to entrench the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and it begins with these words: Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. This phrase underlines the importance of religious traditions to Canadian society and the dignity and worth of human. The Charter attempts to summarize important freedom rights while also setting out traditional rights. The most important of these are, number one, mobility rights, meaning Canadians can live and work anywhere they choose in Canada, enter and leave the country freely, and apply for a passport. Number two, Aboriginal people's rights, meaning the rights guaranteed in the Charter will not adversely affect any treaty or other rights or freedoms of Aboriginal peoples. Number three, official language rights and minority language educational rights, meaning French and English have equal status in Parliament and throughout the governments. Number four, multiculturalism, meaning fundamental characteristics of Canadian heritage and identity. Canadians celebrate the gift of one another's presence and work hard to respect pluralism and live in harmony. The next, which is personally my favorite, is the equality of women and men. In Canada, men and women are equal under the law. Canada's generosity do not extend to barbaric cultural practices and tolerance of spousal abuse, such as honor killings and other gender-based violences. Those guilty of these crimes are severely punished under Canada's criminal laws. One of Canada's important principles is the rule of law. People and governments are formed by laws and not by arbitrary actions. No person or group is above the law. Taking responsibility for yourself and your family, getting a job, taking care of your family, and working hard in keeping with your abilities are important. Serving on a jury. When called to serve on a jury, you're legally required to serve. Serving on a jury is a privilege that makes the justice system work, as it depends on impartial juries made up of citizens. Voting in elections. The right to vote comes with the responsibility to vote in federal, provincial, or territorial and local elections. Helping in the community. Millions of volunteers freely donate their time to help others without pay. Helping people in need, assisting at your child's school, volunteering at a food bank and other charities, and encouraging newcomers to integrate volunteering is an excellent way to gain useful skills and develop friends and contacts. Protecting and enjoying Canada's heritage and environments. All the citizens have a role to play in avoiding pollution while protecting Canada's natural, cultural, and agricultural heritage for our future generations. One question that a lot of people might have concerns defending Canada. There is no compulsory military service in Canada. However, serving in the regular Canadian forces, whether it's Navy, Army, or Air Force, is a noble way to contribute to Canada and is an excellent way and a good choice. Young people can learn discipline, responsibility, and skills by getting involved in the cadets. You may also serve in Coast Guard or emergency services in your community, such as police force or fire department. By helping to protect your community, you are following the footsteps of Canadians before you who made sacrifices in the service of Canada. Aboriginal peoples, based on Discover Canada, the study guide, are believed to have migrated from Asia many thousands years ago. They were well established here long before explorers from Europe first came to North America. First Nations cultures were rooted in religious beliefs about their relationship to the Creator, the natural environment, and each other. Aboriginal and treaty rights are in Canadian Constitution. Territorial rights were first guaranteed through the Royal Proclamation of 1763 by King George III. From the 1800s until the 1980s, the federal government placed many Aboriginal children in residential schools to educate and assimilate them to mainstream Canadian culture, the terrific outcome of which came out many years later, and we heard about it in the news a couple of months ago. These schools were poorly funded and inflicted with hardship on the students, and a lot of them were abused. Aboriginal languages and cultures practice were mostly banned in 2018. Ottawa formally apologized from the students. When we mention Ottawa here, we mean the head of the government that is situated in the city of Ottawa. In today's Canada, Aboriginal peoples hopefully enjoyed renewed peace and confidence, and they have made significant achievements and added to the history of Canada. Today, the term Aboriginal peoples refers to three distinct groups. Indian refers to all Aboriginal people who are not Inuit or Métis. In the 1970s, the term First Nations began to be used. Today, about half of First Nations people live on reserved land, and 600 communities live off different areas. John Buchan was a popular Governor General of Canada who served Canada from 1935 to 1940. Immigrant groups, he said, should retain their individuality and each make its contribution to the national character. The Inuit, which means the people, live in small scattered communities across from our Arctic. One of my favorite public figures that's also Inuk is Sheena Nova. Sheena, if you're watching this, hi, and thank you for teaching us all about your culture. I learned the pronunciation of Inuk from Sheena. However, I apologize to everybody if I mispronounce any words in these videos about Canada. Inuk is singular and Inuit means people, so you should never say Inuit people. That means peoples. Aboriginal people's knowledge of the land, sea, and wildlife enabled them to adapt one of the hardest environments on Earth. English and French. Canadian society today stems largely from the English-speaking and French-speaking Christian civilizations that were brought here from Europe by settlers. English and French are spoken by most people in Canada and are also the country's official languages. The federal government is required by law to provide all the services throughout the country, both in English language and French. It's been said that there are around 18 million Anglophones, that is, people who speak English as a first language, and 7 million Francophones, that's people who speak French as their first language. Majority of people who speak French live in the province of Quebec, and 1 million of them live in Ontario and Manitoba, with a smaller number in other provinces. So the government is bilingual in Canada. The Métis are people of mixed Aboriginal and European background, and the majority of them live in prairie provinces. They come from both French and English-speaking backgrounds and also speak their own dialect. About 65% of Aboriginal people are First Nations, while 30% are Métis and 4% Inuit. The Acadians are the descendants of the 17th and 18th century French settlers in parts of Acadia in the northeastern regions of North America, which is now the Canadian Maritime provinces in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. These colonists settled in what we now know as Maritime between 1775 and 1763. During the war from Britain and France, most of these Acadians were deported from their homeland. This is known as the Great Upheaval. Despite the Great Upheaval, the Acadians survived and maintained their unique identity. Today, Acadian culture is flourishing and is a lively part of Canada. The House of Commons recognized in 2006 that the Quebecois form a nation within Canada. 1 million Anglo-Quebecers are from the Viron part of Quebec, which dates back to 250 years ago. Some Canadians immigrate from war-stricken places and places that had experienced conflict, but such experiences, such as harmful and extreme prejudices, are not welcome. In becoming Canadian, newcomers are expected to embrace democratic principles such as the rule of law. The basic way of life in English-speaking areas was established by hundreds of thousands of settlers that were Welsh, Scottish, or Irish. They were also soldiers and migrants that arrived in Canada from 1600s to 20th century. They were generations of pioneers and builders of British empires, and they were as groups. They were laying down fundamentals to build the society. A lot of Anglophones or English speakers are generally referred to as English Canadians. The majority of Canadians were born in Canada, and this has been true since 1800s. However, Canada is known to be a country of immigrants because over 200 million immigrants came here to defend Canadian way of life. The largest groups are the English, French, Scottish, Irish, German, Italian, Chinese, Aboriginal, Ukrainian, Dutch, South Asian, and Scandinavian. Since 1900s, the immigrants have come from Asian countries. Non-official languages are widely spoken in Canadian homes. Chinese languages are second most spoken at home after English. In Vancouver, 13% of population speak Chinese languages at home. In Toronto, 7%. The great majority of Canadians identify as Christians. The numbers of Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, and members of other religions, as well as other people, are all respected in Canada. They are under harmony and they have mutual respect for each other. Canada's diversity includes gay and lesbian Canadians who enjoy the full protection based on law. Together, these diverse groups sharing common Canadian identity make up today's multicultural society. When Europeans explored Canada, they found all regions occupied by native peoples they called Indians, because the first explorers thought they had reached the East Indies. The native people lived off the land, some by hunting and gathering, others by raising crops. Some were farmers and hunters, and they cooked by smoking. The arrival of European traders, missionaries, soldiers, and colonists changed the native way of life. Large number of Aboriginals died due to lack of immunity. However, Aboriginals and Europeans formed strong economic, religious, and military bonds in the first 200 years of a coexistence, which laid the foundations of Canada. In 1604, the first European settlement north of Florida was established by French explorers, Pierre d'Aumont and Samuel de Champlain. Some struggled against the harsh climate. Champlain allied the colony with Algonquin and Montagnais and Huron, historic enemies of the Iroquois, a confederation of 5 that later became 6. The French and the Iroquois made peace in 1701. The French and Aboriginal people collaborated together in the blooming fur trade economy back then that was driven from the huge demand for beaver pelts in Europe. Outstanding leaders like Jean Talon, Bishop Laval, and Count Frontenac built a French empire in North America that reached from Hudson Bay to the Gulf of Mexico. In 1670, King Charles II of England wanted the Hudson Bay companies exclusively for the fur rights. In 1670, King Charles II of England granted the Hudson's Bay Company exclusive trading rights. For the next 100 years, the company had to compete with Montreal-based traders, the voyageurs, couriers, the skilled and courageous people who traveled by canoe and formed strong alliances with First Nations. English colonies along the Atlantic seaboard eventually grew richer in finances and population than new people from the early 1600s. In the 1700s, France and Great Britain had a war over who controls North America. In 1759, French won the battle against British people, and the battle was called the Battle of Plains of Abraham at Quebec City. And that marked the end of the French Empire in America. The commanders of both armies Brigadier and Wolfe were killed while leading their troops. Following the war, Great Britain renamed the colony province of Quebec. The French-speaking Catholic people, who were known as habitants and they were Canadians, had to strive to keep their way of life in this English-speaking world. To govern the French Roman Catholic majority, the British Parliament passed the Quebec Act of 1774. One of the constitutional foundations of Canada, the Quebec Act accommodated the principles of British institutions to the reality of the province. It allowed them freedom in their religious beliefs for Catholics and allowed them to hold public office, which was not then allowed in Britain. Religious freedom also for Quebecers. The Quebec Act restored French law while maintaining British criminal law. In 1776, the 13 British colonies of the south of Quebec declared independence and formed the United States. North America was again divided by war. More than 40,000 people were loyal to the crown. They were called loyalists. They had to flee the oppression of American Revolution, and they settled in Nova Scotia and Quebec. Joseph Brant led thousands of loyalist Mohawk Indians into Canada. The loyalists came from Dutch, German, British, Scandinavian, and Aboriginal people, and they were Presbyterian, Anglican, Baptist, Methodist, Jewish, Quaker, and Catholic. Democratic institutions developed gradually and peacefully. The first representative assembly was elected in Halifax, Nova Scotia in 1758. Prince Edward Island followed in 1773, New Brunswick in 1785. The Constitutional Act of 1791 divided the province of Quebec into Upper Canada, which is now Ontario, which was mainly Loyalists, Protestants, and English-speaking, and Lower Canada, which is now referred to as Quebec, heavily Catholic and French-speaking people. The Act also granted the Canadians, for the first time, legislative assemblies elected by the people. The name Canada also became official at this time and has been used ever since. The Atlantic colonies and the two Canadas were known collectively as British North America. Slavery has existed all over the world, from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East to Americas. The first movement to abolish the slave trade emerged in the British Parliament in the late 1700s. About 3,000 African American loyalists, freemen, and slaves moved up north in search of a better life. In return, in 1792, some of the African Americans in Nova Scotia who were given poor land moved on to establish Freetown, Sierra Leone, a new British colony for freed slaves. In 1793, Upper Canada, led by Lieutenant Governor Graves Simcoe, and Loyalist military officer, became the first province in the empire to move forward and destroy slavery. In 1807, the British Parliament stopped the buying and selling of slaves, and in 1833, they were able to abolish slavery throughout the empire. A lot of slaves escaped from the United States and settled in Canada via the Underground Railroad, and they were following the North Star. The first ever companies were formed in Canada during the French and Empire regimes, and most of these companies were competing for fur trade. Since the company, along with French and British and Aboriginal employees, was able to dominate the fur trade in the Northwest, now known as Winnipeg, and Fort Victoria. The first ever financial institutions were opened in the late 18th and 19th centuries. The Montreal Stock Exchange opened in 1832. For centuries, Canada's economy was based mainly on farming and on exporting natural resources such as fur, fish, and timber that were transported by roads, lakes, rivers, and canals. Now let's take a look at what happened in the War of 1812. This is also known as the Fight for Canada. After the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte's fleet in the Battle of Trafalgar, the Royal Navy ruled the waves. The British Empire, which included Canada, fought to resist Bonaparte's bid to dominate Europe. This led to American resentment at British interference with their shipping. They believed that it would be easy to conquer Canada, and therefore the United States launched an invasion in June. In 1812, a lot of volunteers and soldiers supported by Britain came to Canada's defense. In July, Major General Brock captured Detroit but was killed while defending against American attack at Queenston Heights near Niagara Falls. This was a battle that the Americans lost. In 1813, Lieutenant Colonel Charles de Salisbury and 460 soldiers turned back 4,000 American invaders at Chateauguay, south of Montreal. In 1813, the Americans burned Government House and the Parliament buildings in York, which is now Toronto. To retaliate in 1814, Major General Robert Ross led an expedition from Nova Scotia that burned down the White House and other public buildings in Washington, D.C. He died in battle soon afterwards and was buried in Halifax with full military honors. Why 1814? The Americans who had tried to conquer had failed. The British paid for a costly Canadian defense system, including the citadels at Halifax and Quebec City, the naval dry dock at Halifax, and Fort Henry at Kingston. Today, one of the popular historic sites. USA border is partly an outcome of the War of 1812, which ensured that Canada would remain independent of the United States. In the 1830s, reformers in both Upper and Lower Canada believed that they want to move forward to full democracy, but the progress was slow. Some believed Canada should adopt American Republican values and even try to join the United States. When armed rebellions occurred in 1837, rebels did not have enough public support to succeed. They were defeated by British troops and Canadian volunteers. A number of rebels were hanged or exiled. Some exiles later returned to Canada. I have to mention two important names here. These two people have done a lot of things for Canada. First one, the Duke of Wellington sent some of his best soldiers to defend Canada in 1814. He then chose Bytown in Ottawa as the end point of the network of forts to prevent the USA from invading Canada again. Wellington, who defeated Napoleon in 1815, therefore played a direct role in founding the national capital. In 1813, Laura Secord, pioneer wife and mother of 5 children, made a dangerous 19-mile journey on foot to warn Lieutenant James Fitzgibbon of a planned American attack. Her bravery contributed to victory at the Battle of Beaver Dams. She is recognized as a heroine to this day. Lord Durham, an English reformer sent to report on the rebellions, recommended that the Upper and Lower Canada be merged and given responsible government. This meant that the ministers of the Crown must have the support of the majority of the elected representatives in order to govern. Controversially, Lord Durham also said that the quickest way for the Canadians to achieve progress was to assimilate into English-speaking Protestant culture. This recommendation demonstrated a complete lack of understanding of French Canadians, who sought to uphold the distinct identity of French Canada. Some reformers, including Sir Pascal Taché and Sir George Cartier, later became fathers of Confederation, as did a former member of the voluntary government in Upper Canada. In 1840, Upper and Lower Canada were united as the Province of Canada. Reformers such as Sir Fontaine and Robert Baldwin, in parallel with Joseph Howe in Nova Scotia, worked with British governors toward responsible government. The first British North American colony to attain the full responsible government was Nova Scotia in 1847 to 48. In 1848 to 49, the governor of United Canada, Lord Elgin, with encouragement from London, introduced responsible government. This is the system that we have today. If the government loses a confidence vote in the assembly, it must resign. La Fontaine, a champion of democracy and French language rights, became the first leader of a responsible government in the Canadas. From 1864 to 1867, representatives of Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and the province of Canada, with British support, worked together to establish a new country. These men are known as the Fathers of Confederation. They created two levels of government, federal and provincial. The old province of Canada was split into two new provinces, Ontario and Quebec, which together with New Brunswick and Nova Scotia formed the new country called the Dominion of Canada. Each province would elect its own legislators and have control of such areas as education and health. The British Parliament passed the British North America Act in 1867. The Dominion of Canada was officially born on July 1st, 1867, until 1982. July 1st was celebrated as Dominion Day to commemorate the day that Canada became a self-governing dominion. Today it's officially known as Canada Day. Okay guys, this is the end of this video. I tried to cover as much as I can up to almost the half of the study guide, but there will be a second video that will cover the second part of the study guide. Once again, this is not the exact word-by-word read of the study guide, but this can help people to get to know a little bit more about Canadian culture and Canadian history. Once again, I leave the link of the Canadian Study Guide, which you can find in canada.ca, down below in the description box. Thank you very much for watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like my video. And until next time, see you guys later.